The start of 2024 was an optimistic time if you were a Daniel Ricciardo fan. The Honey Badger was building off a strong end to 2023, and wherever you went, you had F1 content creators, myself included, tipping the Aussie to be in a Red Bull as soon as Sergio Perez took his ever-dominant RB20 to P16 in qualifying. We'd powered through the McLaren days, where Daniel's pace was about as visible as Zach Brown's gym membership. We'd even kept it together when people were suggesting the worst thing of all, that Daniel should just head to Formula E. But fast forward just 2 weeks, and now this has happened. And it kind of feels like we're back to square one again. Daniel's first 2 races of 2024 haven't gone exactly according to plan, but is it time to be concerned yet? And should we be worried at all? Well, you guys have been great at reminding me just how Ricciardo's season has gone so far, so if you could do just as good of a job liking the video, that would be great. Now let's dive into this situation a little bit deeper. Before we get into all that, I'd like to share something a little more personal with you all. Around 4 or 5 years ago, I found myself struggling a lot with my mental health. There was never one major trigger, just lots of little small problems that seemed to pile up on top of one another, and that came to a head just before March of 2020, which I think takes the cake as far as crap timing is concerned. As a result, I never really spoke to any professionals about it, and found myself keeping my feelings locked up, which anyone in a similar situation can probably tell you isn't the best thing to do. And while I was mostly able to get over my problems on my own, since then I've always been a huge advocate of finding ways to improve people's mental health and well-being. So when BetterHelp got in touch and wanted to be a paid partner in this video, I couldn't possibly say no. In case you've never heard of them before, BetterHelp connects you with a credentialized therapist who's trained to listen to you and give you unbiased and helpful advice on your situation. This can be done over the phone, via video call, or through messaging. Basically, however is most comfortable or easy for you. If you're interested, you can head to the link on screen, which I've also put down in the description below, and answer a few questions to get started. BetterHelp will usually then be able to connect you with one of their therapists in as little as 48 hours. I never knew of anything like this back when I was going through a rough time, and genuinely think it could have helped me a ton. So once again, to get started, head to that link in the description, or choose FP1Will during the sign-up process, and you can enjoy a special discount on your first month using the service. Thanks again to BetterHelp for being a paid partner for this video. Now let's get back to Ricciardo. So the Honey Badger's return in 2023 started off okay. The stats alone will tell you the Aussie ended his first race with AlphaTauri in Hungary ahead of teammate Yuki Tsunoda, and when you factor in how he was almost assassinated by Guan Yu Slow into turn 1, recovering to where he qualified in P13 wasn't a bad effort, though Yuki's strategy that weekend was interesting, to say the least. Spa was less good for Ricciardo, stuck behind K-Mag all race long, while Tsunoda had one of his better weekends of 2023. Then we get to Zandvoort, where Oscar Piastri decided there was no room for a second Aussie on the grid, and thus broke Daniel's hand. That's the TLDR version of events anyway. Daniel's second sabbatical ended up being both a blessing and a curse in retrospect. He now couldn't prove to the world that his Hungary pace was a fluke, but a new contender had entered the ring in the form of Liam Lawson. Now let's just pause for a minute so Josh Revel can clean his bed sheets. Love you really, Josh. Lawson's stand-in performances put the New Zealander on the map, Singapore being the main standout, getting into Q3 on only the 3rd time of asking, and then staying there to secure a stunning P10 for the team in the race. The only mistake he made all weekend was knocking the Dutch Messiah out of quali and thus placing himself next to Christian Horner on Jos Verstappen's hit list. Liam's performances all of a sudden made him a real contender for AlphaTauri's full-time race seats in 2024. But with Ricciardo practically promised that seat when he signed mid-season, that just left Tsunoda, who at this point couldn't be compared to Lawson as engine troubles and Checo the terrorist made it impossible for him to complete a single racing lap. Thus when it came to the final decision, Lawson found himself on the sidelines once again, the team opting to continue with Daniel and Yuki into 2024. Ricciardo would then return, and performances like his P7 in Mexico seemed to support the theory that Daniel really had found his form again, after that went MIA at the start of 2021. The remaining 2 rounds were nothing to shout about, so that takes us to this year, where things haven't exactly gone to plan. The newly rebranded Visa Cash App RB team were the talk of the town heading into testing. Everyone worried that they'd just show up with last year's RB19 and force us to consider P4 as the win in every Grand Prix going forwards. Actually, we've still got Checo, so let's call that P3. Despite this, RB were keen to dull expectations, and their early pace in testing seemed to back this up. Then they topped FP1 in Bahrain, and all of us Danny Rick fans got too excited once again. Mercedes ending the second session in P1 was probably enough of an indicator that we shouldn't take these results too seriously anyway. And sure enough, when the cars had to set the grid for real, The RBs found themselves P11 and 14, Tsunoda now the man on top for the first time all weekend. From there on out, it was clear that Yuki had the pace over his more experienced teammates, though once again, he got given a run plan straight out of Race Strategies for Dummies, which if you look in the front cover was published in a place called Maranello. As a result, Daniel found himself staring down Tsunoda's rear end with much faster tyres, and had a better shot at challenging Kevin Magnussen up the road for the coveted place of P12. Now up to this point, no matter where Yuki finished, he would have walked out of Bahrain the better RB driver. Yet he decided to let his short man syndrome get the better of him, argue the call, give Daniel the place too late to do anything anyway, and then attempt a World War II manoeuvre on his teammate in the cooldown lap. Now when we remember that these guys are busy fighting for Red Bull's lapdog position, that's called not putting yourself in the most favourable light. Yuki seemed to have realised this in the lead up to round 2 in Saudi Arabia, and this time he looked to turn all that pent-up anger into actual results. From FP2 onwards, Yuki was always ahead of his teammate, the most stark comparison coming in qualifying, over a half a second separating the pair. And that meant the difference between P9 for Tsunoda and P14 for Ricciardo. The RB's race pace being comparable to a forklift rather hampered Yuki getting anywhere near the top 10 in the Grand Prix. But things could be worse. You could be called Daniel Ricciardo. The Aussie found his race hampered early on after a piss-poor stop in the safety car period. He still found himself miles off the grid though throughout most of the race, only able to close up when Kevin Magnussen let his father Jan drive the house on Saturday. But even after that, the Aussie was unable to get past Logan Sargent, and that's the fact that's got us all worried. As Danny seemed to celebrate these efforts with a donut in the closing stages of the race, that's got us even more worried, and now I'm thinking that Ricciardo Red Bull hat I bought just a few weeks ago might be going towards the rear of my collection. Helmut Marko has now had his assessment of the situation, and as you can probably gather, the one-eyed pirate isn't very happy. At least Yuki can qualify, doesn't really put either driver in the best light, and surely this has to hurt more for Ricciardo, especially given all the expectation and hype we had just at the start of the season a few weeks ago. But should we be concerned yet? Well, let's get the obvious point out the way first. We are 2 races into the year, and quite frankly, it's way too early to be discussing the true running order at this stage. For all we know, we'll rock up to Australia and the RB20 will be a flaming hot pile of... Okay, that's wishful thinking, but you get my point. If you look at the stats we have so far though, the RB appears to be the most improved car over 1 lap pace, a full 1.4 seconds faster in Jeddah qualifying, though I don't think that figure has been fully corrected for who we had at the wheel that weekend. What's more concerning to me is Daniel's own assessment as of late, describing his troubles as a mystery, which is not too far off how he felt about his McLaren days a few years ago. It appears now that RB have managed to identify a few of the issues surrounding their 2024 car, but as the Silver Arrows can tell you, finding a problem is very different from fixing it, and in an era of the budget cap, that becomes even harder to do. It just begs the question then, how much longer will RB have to suffer for, and how much longer will Red Bull give Ricciardo to prove he really is back to his best? We sort of just assumed he was, given the flashes of pace we saw at the back end of 2023, but his time out for injury made it harder to ascertain just how back he really was. We also can't forget about the man Ricciardo hopes to replace, and it has to be said, Sergio Perez has made a flying start to this new season. Granted, he's done that before, but the Mexican has made lots of changes over the off-season to avoid a similar slump in the future. So if the dream really is dead for Daniel Ricciardo, and Yuki is outperforming him, what's the point of keeping the Aussie at RB? This is still Red Bull we're on about, and as painful as it would be to see Daniel drop for someone like Lawson mid-season, it's nowhere out of the realms of possibility. Do I really think this could happen? Well, honestly, and sadly, yes. But as I said, it's still early in the year, and Daniel still has at least a few races to begin turning this around. I can't lie though, I'm nowhere near as hopeful as I was before though. What are your thoughts? Is Daniel washed, or does he deserve more time? Let me know down in the comments below, and head over to the poll on my community page to vote and argue there as well. Don't forget to check out BetterHelp in the description, and a thank you also goes out to my patrons and channel members for all of their continued support as well. They get early access to a lot of my videos, so if you're interested in that, then all the information you need is also down there in the description. Finally, I've been told I need to plug myself more, so if you want to hear more of my takes, then you can follow me on whatever social media you want, and join our Discord, which I think is still alive. I'll be honest, I've not checked on it for a while. Okay, I'll see you very soon for another video, but until then, have a good one.